I get the icon in cornflower blue?
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 44 of Can I Get That Software in Blue? I'm your host, Chad Tyndall. Joining me as always, just back from his trip eating tapas in Barcelona. With jokes and wisdom, he sets the tone on his podcast microphone, the emperor of elastic and the hero of Hamon, Steve Mazak, everybody.
Chad, great intro. You make me remember Hamon like I just had it.
I think you did just have it, right? Didn't you go to Paco Morago or something recently in Barcelona?
Yes, it's still delicious. It's Michelin rated, not Michelin starred, I think.
It should be starred. It should have a star.
But you know what's funny is I went there with two other people and we had a great meal, like Hamon, croquettes, everything. 180 euros we walked out of there with. I just talked to some colleagues at Elastic that had a really nice fancy dinner in New York, $500 a person.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think mine was better, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, New York, you pay through the nose for sure. No question about it.
Yeah, and then I had a little adventure on the way to the airport. I got pulled over in a cab for not wearing my seatbelt, so I had to pay a ticket on the side of the road in Barcelona. That was a fun experience.
I just had an adventure. At Sunday night, I was flying, and I travel with protein powder for protein shakes when I work out. And every once in a while, the powder like flags the X-ray scanner, and they have to like swab it and put it through the scanner. But this time, it set off the bomb detector. Two different things set off the bomb detector, and they're like, "All right, you can't leave. We got to call over the bomb squad. They have to clear it." And he had to come over from another terminal or something. He was like a Navy guy. He had a Navy lanyard on and ID and everything. And he set out all these blotter papers and he sprinkled it on a dozen different papers and used all these different reagents and all of that. And then he was like, "Okay, yeah, you're clear to go. Have a nice trip." But it took like an hour.
Do you know why it's setting off those detectors?
No, something in there. Just I don't know. I talked to one of the trainers that I know, and he was like, "Yeah, in the last 20 years, that's happened to me about 6 times because he's flying with it all the time, and every once in a while, it just sets off the bomb detector." So look, I've been flying a lot for 25 years, and the TSA and the airlines never miss a chance to find a new way to make it suck. They
will
terrible.
Always do that. I remember. I don't know if I told the story on the pod, but when my daughter was younger, we used to travel for her cheerleading competitions. And she was the captain one year, and she had the spirit stick, which is an actual thing. If you've ever seen a cheerleading movie, they talk about the spirit stick. And it's just a PVC pipe with glitter in it. That's all it is. But it's a PVC pipe with 2 caps on it. And guess what it looks like?
A pipe bomb.
So we went through the security at Portland, Oregon's airport, and man, pandemonium.
Oh my goodness.
She was in tears.
Oh.
You're not supposed to drop the spirit stick. You're not supposed to open it. Like, it was a whole thing.
Don't open it.
I know.
Why?
Don't drop the spirit stick.
Don't let it hit the ground. We're all gonna die. Also, let me get this straight. You had a dispute with your plumber and he poured concrete into your sewer drain line?
Oh my God, it's a whole thing. Yeah, so long story short, my wife and I built a house, and the builder got arrested after we got the keys for reasons I won't go into, but he's in jail now. But because of that, he didn't pay all the contractors their final invoices. And 2 years later, our plumbing starts backing up, and I call the plumbers. They come out. They find about 80 feet of concrete in the pipe. And they said the only possible way this happened was sabotage. And they said it's fairly common in this city that they are in. It's Prescott, Arizona, where contractors, if something goes bad or they're just pissed off one day, they will sabotage each other's projects. And the challenge is, like, I have no proof. You know what I mean? But the plumber said there's no other explanation for this. Like, why else would there be this much concrete in your pipe? They had to grind through it. It took them forever. We're still trying to get it all done. But the challenge is, like, this could cost me like $40,000-$50,000 because they might have to dig up the street, which means permits, construction crews. It's like 14 feet underground under a cul-de-sac. It's just like,
that's ridiculous.
So whatever, working through it. It's interesting because, like, I have no choice to fix it, which takes a lot of emotion out of it. It's like, I have no choice. So just rolling with the punches. Ian, I'm sure we're going to talk about rolling with the punches today. But
you're in the radical acceptance phase.
Yes, like almost instantly. Like I can't cry about it.
You skipped the grief cycle. You went
Yes.
straight to acceptance.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me introduce our special guest. From hanging with Bono to rescuing strays and coaching up sales teams in all kinds of ways, his new book is full of stories that will make you think, wow. Our guest for the day, Ian Spandow. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Chad. Good morning, Steve.
Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So you have a new book, Rescuing Dogs and Salespeople, Memoir of a Mutt, available now on Amazon. I read it last night on my way home. I was worried because when I got on the plane, I was so tired. It was the end of a long week, and I actually fell asleep during the takeoff part of the flight. I was like, oh, God, I'm not going to be able to stay awake and read a book. Once I started reading it, no problem staying awake. I could not close my eyes. I mean, it's a great book. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the podcast. I honestly mean that. It was really exciting. I felt that you took me on an emotional journey. I mean, the whole book was like a roller coaster. It was like, your business was having a tough time, and not to, I'm gonna give a little spoilers because that's what we do here a little bit. But your dad gives you a loan to keep the lights on. Then you find a VC who wants to invest. Then your business partner dies and he was only 30 years old. Then you go to close a deal with Saks Fifth Avenue, and then they cancel it. And it's like, I'm on the roller coaster ride with you. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's all or nothing. It tends to have been all or nothing for me. There was never any middle ground. I did most things backwards. I think most people in the tech industry, they start working for a firm and they, earn their stripes and they move up through, and maybe hopefully in their 30s or their 40s, they rise up and they become a CEO. I did the opposite. I was 20 years old, back when I thought I knew everything, you realize, like all these years later, what the hell was I thinking? But I did everything backwards. Ran a software company for 13 years before I actually got my first paycheck from Oracle, of all companies. So
yeah, I actually made a note here about you doing everything backwards. Not just that, but like most people, they get a girlfriend, then they move in with their girlfriend to save money, and then they get married, right? That's like the normal way to do it.
Yeah.
You got a roommate to save money, and then you made her your girlfriend, and then you got married. So that was like, oh, he's doing everything out of order.
Well, there's a good hack on this. The best people in the world to marry are your roommates because you've already lived with them, right? How many people do I know that are terrific as long as they've got their own apartment and he has his, but when they move in together, that's when you find out, who's got smelly socks or whatever. So,
That's right.
Yeah, it was a good way of doing that backwards.
I found myself identifying with your story a lot. I mean, I just personally, I had trouble kind of fitting in school until I went to college. I was, I'm a ham radio operator. I have my ham radio right here behind my monitor. High school sports, both in band. I'm still a musician. You're a musician. In fact, I just got a new trumpet today. I'm really excited to get in and play it. Although I never got to hang out with Bono. So it just felt like a lot of commonalities, exploring I moved to New York in 2008. I met my now wife here. We were exploring the kind of the high-end dining food scene in New York City, which you write about doing with your girlfriend in the book. So I also started a failed educational DVD business. There was just like so many points of commonality.
I love it. Chad, you mentioned new trumpet. Like, what did you get and why did you get a new trumpet?
I mean, I'm like any other guy. I like my toys. I just unboxed it about an hour ago. I got this new C trumpet. It's pitched in the key of C, so it's for orchestral music. Right. So I'm in the Jackson Heights Orchestra. I play a lot of orchestral music. My C trumpet that I had before was over 25 years old, and I just kind of wanted something new. And I knew maybe 2 years ago I was going to start looking. And so I went to the ITG, it's the International Trumpet Guild. They have an annual conference every year. I went to the one last year because it was in California. And all of the trumpet manufacturers come and they bring their trumpets. So if you're in the market, you can just go and just try everything. You bring your own mouthpiece. And I just went and I played like 100 different trumpets, C trumpets. Anybody who had a C trumpet, I played it. And from the whole price range, from the low end to like the absolute highest end that was available there.
As a matter of interest, what is the high end of a trumpet?
Yeah.
Well, until you're going up into the custom world, because custom you can spend whatever you want. But just for like high end off the shelf, it's like $5-6 grand. It's not outrageous. It's the low end of a crappy violin, really, right?
Yeah.
No, I've seen violins on Amazon for $160.
Yeah, like the trumpet we had Neil on a couple episodes ago. He had just received a custom Monet trumpet. That was probably, I don't know, he didn't tell me the number, but I'm going to guess it was like 10, 12 grand. And that's the high end, right? The one Wynton Marsalis plays is the same brand as what Neil had. It's probably 15 grand. So it's not like the $2.4 million Stradivarius violins that people play. It's not at all like that. But
Well, I collect guitars, and like 5K is the high end of guitars, let me tell you.
Yeah, I collect synthesizers, and the high end of synthesizers is like, well, it can go up into the hundreds of thousands for like a CS80, which is the old Yamaha one that everyone knows from Blade Runner. But it's like 8-9 grand for the highest end one right now. It's not.
Well, Steve, I don't want to age you, but you probably know what a Fairlight is.
Yeah.
And when I was a teenager, I recorded in the U2 studio in Dublin. It's called Windmill Lane, and they had a Fairlight. And just for the heck of it, we just had to use this Fairlight for something, right? It played no part in the song we were recording, by the way.
Yeah.
But because it was there, we managed to get some sort of cool, wavy, synthy sort of sounds out of it. But in those days, it was a CRT monitor, this big.
Yeah.
And 100 lines of code just to get a waveform to change. It was hard work.
That's so fun.
I think I can do it all on my phone now, put it that way.
I mean, you could probably vibe code a synthesizer these days.
Right?
Almost certainly. Steve, you said that you had a long drive last night and you kind of prepped for this podcast in a new way.
There was a bug in our workflow this time. I didn't get the book until this week, and I just didn't have time to read the whole thing. So what I did was I decided to use AI to help me summarize it. But I didn't want to like read a summary. I wanted to listen to it. And if I had time, I would have sampled Ian's voice and like made it his
You
voice.
do that too? Wow.
But I didn't. Yeah, you can do that. It's kind of freaky. So I use Notebook LM, which is one of my favorite go-to tools. So what I did was I uploaded the PDF into the UI. And then all you have to do once it reads the PDF is just click audio overview and it will generate a podcast. And you can always tell the podcasts that are generated by Notebook LM because they use the same two voices. It's a man and a woman, but they're engaging to listen to. And it was incredible. Like it generated like a 30-minute podcast and I listened to it on the way home. And it was like, made me want to go back and just read everything. Because some of the stories I heard about, I was like, I want to know more about this. Like all the way back to the Kirby vacuum story. It's like, I want to know more about like what Ian saw and what inspired him to think this was the path he was going to go on. And, I'm a dog lover. So, your story about dogs and stuff like that was like heartstring type stuff. So it was fascinating.
Does it turn it into like a audio book or does it do it in like a podcast format?
Podcast format. So they talk about the book almost like it's a life story. Let's talk about the life story of this person and pull out all the highlights. And they're just very emotive. Like the voices they use are just so good. And they pull out little things like, when you talked about some of the tragedies in the book, like they reacted as if it was a tragedy. It wasn't like, it was really good. Yeah. Great tool. If you haven't used it, like seriously check it out. It's become a core part of my workflow. Just another aside, like how I use this thing, I've actually uploaded all of my synthesizer manuals into Notebook LM. And when I have questions about how to do something on a synth, because there are always, unique button combinations you have to push, I just ask Notebook LM now. I haven't read a product manual in like a year because I don't need to anymore. I uploaded my refrigerator manual a month ago to figure out how to change the filter. It just works.
Well, let's talk about the book. So you mentioned the Kirby vacuum story. That's actually where I wanted to start. Ian, you're an expert in sales methodologies and training salespeople, and this is kind of what your career has become. But how crazy it was that you literally got introduced to your passion for sales by watching a door-to-door vacuum sales rep as a child sell something to your parents. That's a wild story.
And it stuck with me. All of the, the way everybody has that one thing they remember from their childhood, like the earliest thing. I mean, I think I was 5 years old, but I can still see the guy's face and I can still hear his accent. Actually, the American accent was what had me enthralled, right? Because in Dublin, Ireland in the early 70s, believe me, there was no Americans. And, you had MASH and a couple of TV shows that we watched, but hearing an actual American accent at my front door was the coolest thing ever to me.
These are words I've never heard in my life.
but here's the funny thing. All these years later, every time not every time, but frequently when I go into a store I haven't been into, they immediately go, "Oh, where's your accent from?" And I say, "Well, I'm from Ireland." And it's an instant thing every time. I love the Irish accent. Oh, the Irish accent. To us, it's normal, just like American is normal to you. But I've been here for 15 years and I still get that. I still get, oh, your accent, you know. So if you believe the amount of people I've had in classrooms, actually, who I taught Sandler many hundreds of times. And I've had more than a handful of people come up to me saying, you know, Ian, I've taken this whole course before. I read the book, you know, I know all this stuff already, but hearing it in your accent somehow makes it more real or more believable. And that I've never understood. Like, why would an accent change the content or the meaning of anything?
It's a thing. Like, I remember one of my very first meetups when I was a Java developer, the guest speaker was an Italian. And it was the first time I had ever heard the Italian accent at length in person. I still remember that presentation.
And it's lovely, the Italian accent, by the way, in English, isn't it?
I love it. I wish all technical topics were explained to me with an Italian accent.
Well, you got to put your fingers up in the air.
Of course. Yeah. No pointer exception.
Well, okay. So Ian, you had an interesting point in there that you said that the demo is about your customer, not about your product. And I know that sales methodologies and approaches have changed a lot since the Kirby vacuum cleaner was selling to your parents. Now we're in the tech world and we're not really doing door-to-door sales. So I guess, how do you think about product-led sales versus sales-led growth? You know, product-led growth for sales-led growth. And, you know, when a product-led growth is actually really more about the product than the customer, kind of.
Exactly. Right? Well, you know, great example of that is the 90s, right? So I wrote the Celtic Tiger, as you probably heard or read, where tons of technology companies coming into Ireland, you know, opening up. We were selling training, you know, we developed training. And in those days, a lot of this stuff was new. Right, DVDs hadn't even come out. You know, a lot of people didn't even have a color VGA monitor in their office. Right, so when they started seeing color graphics and animations and stuff like that, it was all about the product. But 3-4 years later, e-learning is a thing, right, or CBT as we call it, computer-based training. Now it was more about the customer and the relationship, because we all use the same tools: Tencore, Authorware, Director, all those kind of things. So it was really down to your designers, your engineers, you know, but a lot of it was the same. We had 3 or 4 competitors within 3 or 4 years of starting up, because people could use these tools. Now they had to actually be either terrific salespeople or, you know, have the ability to penetrate. For instance, a lot of our customers were government organizations. If you didn't know government, if you didn't know how they worked, it really didn't matter how good your product was. You know, you didn't get the demo, period.
I really love that quote. I was going to bring it up, is that the demo is about the customer, not the product. I think this is something that is probably a guiding principle for people when they first start doing software demos, but it's really easy to forget because you get bombarded with new features in your product all the time and you just want to show the new feature. But the most compelling demos are the ones that you see yourself in. You know, we've started using like vibe coding techniques to build demos at Elastic, and it's great because you can use their logo, you can use their products, and it takes minutes to build. And it's so much more compelling, in my opinion, because they see themselves in what you're showing. And you got to connect somehow, right? Feature tours are boring. That's why we call them feature tours. It's not a positive thing. So I just love that statement. I think it's something that we all need to remember constantly. I think the other thing you said is like, you know, give me what I need, not what I asked for. How do you teach that?
So I get asked that a lot. And where I borrowed it from was from my wife works in pediatric cardiology, and she's a nurse, and she works with a surgeon every single day, and the same surgeon for the last 15 years. That's his rule: give me what I need, not what I ask for. She presides over, I think it's something close to 200 instruments, and they're laid out just so on this very particular tray.
Yeah.
And when they're operating on the child's heart, the surgeon is eyes in all the time, and he'll put his left hand out, and without any speaking or hints, my wife will put whatever he needs into his hand. But occasionally after 10 or 12 hours of surgery, he might say 2 millimeters when he means 1 millimeter or something like that. So she will overrule him many times a day. And it really struck me. I learned all this when I first met her. And I was like, well, hang on. And at that time, I think I was at 10gen with you, Chad, or MongoDB as it's called now. And I remember bringing it in there and saying, well, how do you second guess somebody who's way senior to you? You know, this guy's one of the world's leading heart surgeons and got 30 years on my wife, but she's overruling him essentially and giving him what he needs. So I remember bringing this to, I think it was Max at the time. And I said, look, you know, everyone's going to ask for a quick fix. They're going to ask for, you know, fast results, right? Like, give me something that helps me right now today. And The problem with those types of things is they go away very quickly.
Yeah.
They're fleeting. So building out a program, building out an actual structure for learning, and LMS, all that kind of stuff is what at that time the company needed because it was growing so fast. But with fast growth, as I'm sure you both know, comes fast demands.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the projects that you're deep in, that might be a 6-month project, will get stalled and or shit canned basically for a more immediate need. Oh, we got a SCO, we got a QBR, we got something that, we got a big product, damn, whatever it might be. So I try and stick with that. It's the same with dogs. We have many people apply for certain dogs, and we just know that particular breed is not correct for that home. Oh, I've always wanted an Irish Wolfhound. Yeah, but you live in a 900 square foot apartment. So you might want an Irish Wolfhound, but honestly, maybe a poodle is a better option for you.
That's funny. So I wanted to dig in on the sales enablement thing because it's something that I've done before. I do it still today. I love enablement. But one of the challenges I've had is like trying to get the enablement to stick, right? Because there's that aspect of if you don't use it, you'll lose it. So how do you approach that, or how did you approach that when you're thinking about how do you make the thing stick?
Yeah, it actually goes back to school days. And I kind of worked this out pretty early. That's why maybe we had some success in the 90s with e-learning, is that you have to play. You have to have fun and play when you're learning. If you think about every single school from 4-year-old up to almost 17, you study, you learn, and then you go out into the schoolyard and you play. Or you play sports, or you play basketball or football or whatever it might be. And then you go back and you study again. And I'm a firm believer that that's what gives you the energy to learn. Right, is that you just had some fun there. You wanted to go to school today because there's a big game after school. Or I played rugby in school, so rugby match days were better than school days, right? Yeah. Because you got to play. So from very early on, I play into all my lessons. And I really do mean play, and some of it super absurd and out there. I can remember being in Romania. We got 35 people out to do a freeze mob, if you know what that means. You go to a train station, everybody just stands completely still for 30 seconds until everyone starts gazing at them. And then a little secret sign comes out and everyone just walks off as if nothing happened. I still get mails about that 20 years later from people saying, oh man, I'll never forget that day. That was so much fun. And I usually ask them, well, do you remember any of the lessons from that day too, But yeah, I've run something I call a newspaper fashion show for better than 30 years now. And essentially I'll give a team in a classroom a whole pile of newspapers, and I'll give them 10 minutes and I'll say, right, you have to create and model an outfit out of those newspapers. To just get newspapers and tape. And then somebody has to actually narrate the catwalk, and I would play Madonna's Vogue in the background or whatever. And some of the newspaper fashion items I've seen would blow your mind. And some of these people were actually in the retail industry before and knew a little thing or two about it.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of things, believe it or not, that they remember. But the good news about that is that then when I would run another class, people would want to go to it. And an awful lot of corporate training. And I found this not just at Oracle, but at many, many places. It was just seen as a sort of a required, I got to go to this 2-day course on X, Y, Z. Really no appetite for it. Certainly when I joined in Oracle Middle East, Africa, Europe. But within a year, we had a team and we did these games in all of our learning, and onboarding was there was lots of sort of quizzes and hunts and treasure hunts and things like that, and whodunits and all sorts of stuff. And so, when people saw training on their calendar or enablement sessions, they actually wanted to go to them. And that's half the battle right there.
I think you're absolutely right. I remember reading a Harvard Business Review article years and years ago about this study that they had done on like how people learn better when they're having fun. And I have tried to take that philosophy into my teachings, is like add jokes and like make it light and engage emotions, not just intellect, to get them, or even physical body, like you did with the fashion show. I can imagine this haute couture outfit brought to you by the Wall Street Journal.
No, Steve, you've been doing a good job with that lately. I've seen you do it a few times myself, where you just ad lib a customer session, or or when you did the sales training in Chicago, you're just kind of making it up on the fly, but you're making it interactive, and the crowd has to engage with it and really think about it. So you did it like more like an improv thing, like a yes and.
Yeah, I learned the improv techniques from one of my good friends, RC, and she brought them to Elastic because she was an improv comedian before she became an SDR. And she still does improv today. And those sessions, I ran some improv sessions with the account teams, and The thing I'll always remember is one of the reps that was like the highest attaining rep at Elastic at the time. And he's just success after success, this guy. He said it was the best sales enablement he had ever attended. And I think it's because he had fun, and he hates sales enablement.
Yeah.
Right. So it just always stuck with me that you've got to make it fun. You know, it helps if you have a little bit of a sense of humor, but Ian, I'm sure there's a lot of other ideas I could take from your lessons and like apply them.
Well, I'd love to see it. I mean, I don't know if you've written it down anywhere. I'd love to see a list of all the different games and activities and stuff that you've used in these things over the years, and just be able to use them myself, you know?
Well, the easiest one, and the one that I travel with, is to bring a tennis ball into a classroom. And then I just, at various exercises, I have people throw the tennis ball to the next person. So if they're learning off a, pain funnel or something like that, I'll get it so that that ball is really moving fast. And I'll say something like, okay, we've got to get through this 10 times in a row without dropping the ball. So there's usually somebody will fumble the ball, and I'll start all the way back from zero. And each time that would happen, the boos and jeers would get louder. And sometimes literally we'd get to 9.5 pain funnels or something, and somebody would funnel the ball, and everyone would just go, they'd all lose their shit, But it works. And, using physicality as well is super important. Like, think about us three now, right? We're going to sit at our desks for the next hour and a half, 2 hours, right? So I have a game I used to play called the opposites game. I still do it. And I get people to face each other, and I just say, okay, you just got to do the opposite of what I call out. So if I call up, you point down. If I call out left, you point right. And this is sort of quick draw. And the idea is, well, there's some science behind it as well, right? When you physically move things, it kind of rewires certain connections in the brain. So I'll do that for, 5 rounds, and then everyone sits down, they're a little bit more energized. And then an hour later, if I see some heads slumping or people starting to, shift a lot in their chairs, I'll do another one, but then I'll throw something else into it. And I'll say, okay, it's the opposites game, but this time if I say a city, it's you do the truth. And if I say a county or a state, you do the opposite. So I'll say, Florida, left, right? So not the state, I got to stick with left.
Yeah.
Oh, man. It's getting complicated.
Really? Yeah, exactly. I'd get worse as well. I'd use numbers. I'd say, well, even numbers are true, odd numbers are false. Okay, 2,427 up. No, shoot. No, right? And it really physically makes you, one, move, and 2, think. So, you get those 2 combinations, people tend to get energized.
I just recently, like a week or 2 ago, I watched the World Championship Simon Says competition. And
of course there is.
Oh,
of course
yeah.
there's a World Championship.
Oh, yeah. And the last 2 people, I mean, they went for like 10 minutes until someone made a mistake. It was really crazy. Actually, somewhere in the middle, they both made the mistake at the same time. So then it kept going.
Wow.
They both made the same mistake. And then it went like another 5 minutes. And I was like, I wouldn't have lasted 8 seconds in this, because the guy's calling it like he's the Micro Machines guy, right? It's like, touch your head. Simon Says, touch your head. Look at your. I mean, he's going like an auction caller. It was so fast.
Yeah. There's a Russian version of Simon Says, by the way, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It's like Vladimir Says, I guess.
I was gonna say.
But I can remember doing that exercise in Moscow, and one of the guys turned around and said, "Oh, this is just like, Vladimir Says," and I was like, "Oh, Simon Says," and they didn't know Simon, but they knew their version of it.
That makes me wonder why it's called Simon Says. I never thought to ask that question.
I wonder who Simon was, right?
Yeah.
Who is this Simon guy, and why are we doing what he tells us to do? Oh my goodness.
So funny. But there is something about like memory too, and how memories get stored in our brain. I don't think we fully understand this. We could, I don't know. But like the research I've done is that when you engage at least two centers, like intellect, emotion, and physicality, you're much more likely to remember the things. And when you're on Zoom, it's hard to do the physical. Like maybe I should start asking people to do jumping jacks or play a weird game, but like in person, way easier.
Well, as musicians, you guys will get this, right? So non-conscious competence, right? That tune that you don't even have to think about, you don't have to look at the keys or anything. You played it 1,000 times, right?
Muscle memory.
Yeah. There's only a few things that we as humans are typically non-consciously competent at. Driving a car is one of them, right? You get into your car, you drive 2 hours, you don't even think about a thing. But the other one, and this is what I've worked with a lot, and I get a lot of pushback, is handwriting. Because by the time you're 6 or 7 years old, you can write your name without looking at the page, right? You don't have to think about the shape of the letters. So it's going from the non-conscious to a piece of paper. So this is why I favor, to this day, even though everyone's got fantastic AI things running on their phones all the way through my class, is to take a pen and paper and write that down. Because the actual act of committing it to a piece of paper is another reinforcing learning technique. One that's sadly almost gone at this point, right? I don't know.
Yeah, typing isn't as good.
Well, of course not. All the keys feel the same, right? And even if you are a touch typer and you're 80 words a minute, you're still just touching keys that feel the same. But you're making a shape with a pen. And I, to this day, have a notepad in front of me and I write things down.
Yeah.
No, but Steve, you're absolutely right about the emotion side, because I listen to a podcaster, Ed Milet. He's like a Tony Robbins type, guy, motivational speaker, and he talks about how important it is to, especially us technical people, intellectual thinkers. We want to be in our head and intellectualize stuff.
Yep.
But what people remember is how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
If you made them feel good, they're going to remember that. If you made them laugh, they're going to remember that. If you made them feel bad, they're going to remember that. So it's like, what do you want them to remember about you? And then try to invoke that, get them to invoke that emotion inside of them.
Yeah, like it's great to have on these improv sessions, there's a feeling of tension when people first get there because they don't know what to expect. And that tension turns into fun and learning. And I find sales reps much prefer trainings where there's no prep they have to do and there's no follow-ups, right? Like, I'm not asking you to prep for this. I'm not asking you to do any sort of formal follow-up. I'm asking you to come here with the intention to learn and be present. And that's the other thing, Ian. I don't know if you talk about this much when you do your trainings, but like this idea of being present is something that is not often talked about, almost never taught, and is the single most important skill I've learned to be good at my job.
Violently agree. I actually did a session yesterday with Okta. It was just an hour-long Zoom class. And I started the class by saying, hey, I've got good news and bad news. Which would you like first? And, people always say, well, the good news. And what I say is, well, the good news is for the first 5 to 6 minutes of this class, you will not have to do anything at all. And I just let that sit there for a minute. And then I say, and the reason is because it's going to take me about 5 or 6 to just outline our agenda, tell you a little bit about the content and what we're going to do. And probably 6 or 7 minutes from now, we'll actually start into the content. And the chat blew up. The chat is like, oh, great. Well, phew. You could physically see people going, oh, great. Anything at all for the first 6 minutes, right? And then I do my introduction and then we start interacting. But that's, I think, what you're saying, it's that idea of being in the moment.
Yeah.
And addressing the moment, I've seen some terrific sales reps that I've coached who would start a demo like this and going, hey, John, you don't want to be here and I don't want to be here. So let's get through this as fast as we can, right? And the ice is broken,
Yeah.
and several times, good old gong, right? Got a million recording. Several times I've heard prospects say, you know what, that's the most refreshing start to a demo that I've probably had this year. Right? Or something like that,
Yeah.
Or they'll laugh it off or whatever. And they'll say, well, I got a job to do. You got to find a solution. So let's get through this as quick as we can. And maybe I can give you back 10 minutes at the end of the hour.
Yeah.
Those kind of comments, I think, transcend that business talk. It's like when you're on hold talking to somebody and they're saying, oh, sir, my computer's slow. I'm waiting for a minute. You might go, hey, what's the weather like there in Miami right now? You have that little side conversation while you're not addressing the point that you're meant to be. So I try and coach and train that into people to have those side conversations. It's even about changing your tone a little bit. It's like, hey, Chad, what kind of trumpet did you get there? I'm going to change my tone a little bit from the normal way I would be, maybe discussing a business issue or something.
There's little things you can do. Like, I remember when Val Kilmer passed away, he was my favorite actor. And so I found a collage of pictures of him over the years, and I put it as my background for like a month. You would not believe the number of customers that commented on that. And then we started talking about our favorite Val Kilmer movie and like do quotes from like Real Genius or Top Secret. And it was just like such a cool little thing that I wasn't expecting. And it like breaks the ice. The other thing, Ian, I was going to say is like, one of the things I try to help people understand is when you're in a meeting and you start to feel something, like being able to interpret your gut is a skill. And you can't do it if your mind is racing and you're trying to think of the next question, or you're trying to solve the thing they just said in your brain, and then you're not listening to what they said next. And I think that's another thing that it's like, our job is partly to be able to read people and react to what we're reading. Yeah. If we believe that most communication is nonverbal, then What are you seeing in that person's body language right now? How is it making you feel? And are you interpreting those feelings correctly to adjust course on this call? And people have accused me of being like this easygoing. They use the word authentic, which is fine. I try to be authentic, but what I'm basically doing is like just trying to react in the moment and be a human being rather than come in there with the sales pitch all canned and the pressure that I created on myself to get through that pitch.
Yeah.
Whether the customer says they loved it or hated it, I just want to get through the pitch. It's like,
Yeah.
hang on, like just be a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And David Sandler had that nailed back in like the 60s. The bottom of the pain funnel isn't, what do you think about that? It's how do you feel about that?
Yeah, how do you feel about it?
And that's a very different question.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Ian, one thing you point out is how important it is to find something in common with people to establish trust. I think that's so true. And I think that's why it's important for salespeople or people in sales to just have a wide variety of interests. Because if all you can talk about is sports, then you'll only be able to connect with people who can talk about sports. But if you can talk intelligently about music or food or financial world, woodworking, the airline business, like you grew up with your dad, the ballroom dance, whatever it is, like having more things that you can speak intelligently about gives you more opportunities to connect with someone and establish that trust.
Well, I'll tell you a little sneaky trick that I do anytime only since I came to America. Americans move a lot more than Europeans do. So if you take a look at somebody's LinkedIn profile and they're in Chicago or New York or whatever, you only got to go down a few and you'll see that they actually went to school in Florida or they grew up in California or whatever. So when I ask people, where are you from? I'm not asking where they are right now. I'm asking, well, yeah, but did you grow up in Chicago? And they, oh, no, I grew up in, Minnesota. But I will be prepared if I haven't been to that, Minnesota is a bad example, but if I haven't been to that particular place, I'll do some research first off. So, oh, really? You grew up in Dakota, I guess that's mostly farmland and a whole bunch of cattle, and then that's something that they can identify with. For Oracle, I did 32 different countries. So in 7 years, I was Middle East, Africa, Europe, obviously, and then the US for a couple of years and Canada. And I learned to greet people in over 20 languages. I myself speak 4 languages. My mother was French. Mit einem Nachnamen kam Spandow. Ich habe Deutsche, natürlich, right? You can't have a surname like mine without speaking German. And in Ireland, we have Gaelic beaten into us as children. So going to other countries where they're learning through English, I would always make an absolute point, usually on the flight. And I would just learn off a whole bunch of greeting phrases and thank you phrases in their particular language. I remember Romania really sticks in I wrote about this in the book. Romania is a country that I just have a huge passion for. I don't know why, but probably the nicest people I've ever met, the most open, to learning and what have you. And it was just learning a few phrases, to be able to greet them and welcome them in Romanian. That nobody does that, is what they would say to me. Nobody really speaks Romanian unless they're Romanian, right? It's not one of those languages you're going to you're going to learn necessarily.
We're actually working on getting my kids Romanian citizenship. So there's another point of comment.
I'm thinking that's a joke, Chad.
It's not a joke. It's not a joke. I'm working with a Romanian lawyer right now.
Why, Chad? Why are you doing that?
For EU citizenship?
Yeah, for EU citizenship. So my wife is from Moldova, but where the city that her grandpa was born in was in Romania. But at the time when he was born, it was Romanian. He speaks Romanian, or he did. He passed away. And so they qualify through, the grandparent side for Romanian citizenship. And it's like, why not get them a second passport? And if they do it before they turn 18, then they don't have to take the Romanian language test.
Very good.
Yeah,
interesting.
So that's a big advantage. My wife would have to take the Romanian citizenship, Romanian language test, and then they get it for free. Great country.
Have you been to Romania?
I've never been. I would love to.
You really ought to. It's a fantastic country, and the people, like I say, are just amazing.
I know I love the food. I live right next to the Romanian neighborhood here in Queens, New York, and all the restaurant. There's a restaurant called Bucharest. There's a restaurant called Transylvania.
Nice.
There's the Romanian embassy is right there. Actually, is in Queens. So yeah, I know I like the food and the people already.
That's very cool. Ian, I connect with what you said because I had to present in France once, and I know, having been to France a number of times professionally, like a lot of people, they don't speak English and they want to speak French. And I was nervous because it was in France. There's like 200 people in the audience maybe. And so I learned the night before how to say, I'm sorry, I don't speak French. I only speak English. And I opened with that. And I think, number one, people were surprised that I opened with it. And I got a lot of laughs. And all of a sudden, people were engaged in what I had to say.
Je suis désolé.
Je ne
parle pas.
exactly. Yeah, it is. I started using it when I got into cabs, and
Yeah.
it broke the ice. Like
It helps.
it's such an amazing little thing.
Ian, how do you approach? So you mentioned one way of kind of looking up where someone's from or someone lives. But in this world where we're in Zoom calls and all these calls are really just, all right, let's get down to work. There's an agenda. You do your thing, and then boom, it's over, and you move on to the next Zoom call. You're not really like in the room, hanging out, kind of having that. Oh, we're setting up the projector. Let's chit chat, or let's go hang out by the water cooler. All of that is lost in a world where it's nothing but Zoom calls and it's all business. So
Super changed. I was at WalkMe when the pandemic hit, and WalkMe were growing fast. I mean, fast. And I actually left the day of the IPO because after I worked for Oracle, I promised I'd never work for another public company, and I've been as good as my word. But it was a shock, right? So we're onboarding people on the typical, they come to San Francisco for a week. We got them for a week in a classroom. They're staying in a nice hotel. They're eating great dinners every night. There's plenty of time to get to know all these people. And, like you mentioned, breaks, coffee, lunch, whatever.
oh yeah, going out to dinner, going to lunch, yeah, all that stuff.
Overnight Zoom, right? Overnight, just tomorrow. So it really was challenging. I like to think that we got past that challenge, but it was difficult. And your point about body language is, I'm a huge body language. I'm somebody who reads it vividly all the time. And so within a classroom, like I say, this is extremely different to this, right, from my students. But you really don't get that kind of body language on Zoom, and then they can just switch off their camera when they don't want to look like that. So harder again. One of the cracks I have, and I'll share it with you, but I'm sure you guys both already know this, but humans and dogs, and this is where I sort of studied up on it, they tilt their head.
Yes, it's one of my favorite moves.
And the non-verbal message is, I don't see things the way you see them. Right? That's why we do it. That's why dogs do it, by the way. Dogs do it in a hugely exaggerated way because they're hearing the commands that you're saying. They're not understanding it. They're trying to see it from a different angle to see if that'll make them understand it better. So, and there's two variations, right? The tilt with the lean in is, I don't see things the way you see them, but I'm interested in what it is you're saying. And of course, we all know.
Yeah, that one.
the recoil, right? Which is hell no, right? Just absolutely not. So that is the one thing I can still read on Zoom, because you've got a pretty clear, the closer they are to the camera, the better, obviously. Yesterday, actually, there was 2 training rooms on the call and then a bunch of people on Zoom. And that is actually the hardest.
Yeah.
Because I can interact, chat-wise individually with all of my students on Zoom. But if there's 6 of them sitting around in a training room or a meeting room, I really don't know what's going on in that in that room. And it's an inch on my screen, and the people are millimeters.
I just didn't know if you had any other secrets to share around like trying to make connections with people. Now, when it's on Zoom, I like Steve's thing about Val Kilmer. And by the way, and speaking of dogs, my dog when I was a kid, I loved Val Kilmer so much, I named my dog Val.
Nice.
Chad, I feel like we're brothers from another mother.
Totally. Every time we,
Yes.
I'm not surprised. Every time we tell you, did we just become best friends?
Well, Ian, just real quick, one of the techniques I use to get people to turn their camera on in customer calls is I will turn mine on and apologize for not having gone through hair and makeup yet. Almost always gets a laugh, and then magically people start turning their cameras on. And if they can't, they apologize.
That's
and
brilliant.
I'm doing it partly because I'm in my little office all day and I'm isolated, but also
Yeah.
I need to see the body language. So
I liked I don't know if this was a reference to it, but you have you play that game where people have to answer a question with a question. And it makes me think of that movie and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. I didn't know if that was actually you wrote that as a reference to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
It was definitely influenced me. Yeah,
I never thought about using it as a sales technique though, or a training technique. I thought that's an awesome idea.
It becomes really difficult really quickly. We used to have these jokes. It's like, okay, so ask me, do I want to go to lunch? Hey, Ian, do you want to go to lunch? And I'd say, do I look hungry? And they'd say, do you think I care whether you look hungry or not? and you'd say, do you think I'm smart enough to know what you're feeling about whether it immediately devolves into nonsense in 2 or 3 questions. So it's kind of, we used to call them MFEs, which is a meaningful failure experience.
I'm going to borrow that one. Actually, I like that. It's a fun exercise.
Yeah, I like it. I like the whole thing about if someone messes up, then they lose the, whatever, the special prize or something. Yeah.
Oh man, I had some funny stories with that. I don't know whether I did write this one, but the one that really sticks out in my mind is, yeah, so for your listeners, it's a game where I would give a badge on a lanyard to somebody at the beginning of the class. And I'd say, right, all day long, if anyone asks you a question, but the badge just has a question mark on it. All day long, if anyone asks you a question, you have to answer it with a question. Otherwise, you have to give up the badge. And whoever gives me the badge at the end of the day wins a $50 Starbucks voucher or something like that. Can rely on salespeople to be competitive. So they get super competitive with it. The one that really stuck in my mind was I was in Paris. We weren't in an office. We were in a hotel conference room. So there was, staff from the hotel wandering around. And in the middle of my class one morning, there's a knock on the door, and one of the hotel staff walks in, and he calls out this guy's name. He says, "Who is," whatever the guy's name was. And he stands up and says, "That's me." At that point, immediately, the guy opposite him dives over the desk and pulls the badge from his neck, and then goes over and gives the French guy 10 francs, I think it was, or whatever at the time. So he'd actually paid somebody from the hotel to go in and ask a question, knowing that nobody, they wouldn't assume he was part of the game. And then there's a 10-minute debate on whether this is fair rules. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought it was only the students in the class. I said, no. I said, if anyone asks you a question, you gotta answer it with a question, And if he had said, "Why are you looking for me?" Fine, it would have been good. But he just went, "Yeah, that's me." And then on that same course, somebody came up to me and said to me, "Do you know that one of my colleagues rang me at 7 a.m. in the morning and said, 'Is that you, John?' And I said, 'Yes.' And he goes, 'Right, I'm getting the badge.'" Like, call them up in the room, outside of context. So I kind of love that stuff. I'm wondering if either of you ever saw, in the 90s, there was a movie or a training film about the fish market in Seattle. And if you've been to Seattle, you'll know this.
Pike's Market.
Pike's Fish Market, right? And they throw the fish all around, and they have fun with it.
Yeah, it's fun.
And a company called Video Arts did a training movie, like a 30-minute movie about that particular fish market, and about how these guys just loved their jobs because all they did was play all day, and they just had this kind of all sorts of these different sort of pranks and in jokes and what have you. And so that's what I've tried to foster everywhere I've gone. I've kind of tried to copy that, which is like, get something that's your own. That's just you guys. And if you don't work here in 5 years, you'll still remember that particular thing.
Yeah,
about that company.
The story that you told about that psycho American handing out metal business cards and making a big deal about it, was that a subtle nod to American Psycho? I'm catching your movie references here. So
it
like,
technically
the subtle
wasn't.
tastefulness of it.
Well, it came around, politically 20 years later, basically, right? I did make the connection that, okay, so you can just go into a room and brag for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of people who will actually be attracted to that, right? Yeah, that's right. He gave out $3. He would tell everybody that each of his business cards cost $3, and it was made of steel. Not to get anyone in trouble, but you can imagine what people might use a steel card for.
Yeah.
So there was something sort of unwholesome about it from the get-go.
That's hilarious. You have great stories in the book, Ian. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's just such an engaging read. I don't know how you remember all these stories to write them down, 20, 30 years later. The
truth is, I've been telling them in classrooms for 20 years. And honestly, why I did write the book is if I had $1 for every time somebody said to me, "You should write a book," Like the subtitle is A Memoir of a Mutt. And as you've gathered already, I am the original mutt. Like, I have 4 grandparents from 4 different continents, not just different countries, continents: South America, Asia, Africa, and Europe. That's my 4 grandparents, So, and then with a German name and Irish accent, I live in California with my Texan wife, There are no Spandows in Ireland, put it that way, My family dropped in and dropped out. So, yeah. The randomness of it, I suppose, was interesting to people. I can remember delivering in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. They all thought I was American because I was working for Oracle. So they were, I'm not going to say unfriendly, but they were typical. And it was about 15, 20 minutes into the class. And I don't have a very strong Irish accent. I'm from Dublin. So Dublin doesn't have that, country lilt that most people are familiar with. So about 10 or 15 minutes in, this guy in the class puts his hand up. He goes, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Dublin, Ireland." Everything changed. I promise you, at the next break, they were showing me around, just spoiling me rotten, So I understood that people do have preconceived ideas about particular nations and particular companies and things like that. And it's really important to, burst that balloon as fast as you can. And then you tend to get through to people. As it turns out, they had a series of very instructional trainers go out there and basically lecture them.
Yeah.
So my style of learning, where they were standing up and throwing things around the room and all that, was very different to them. So I remember getting really good evaluations on that course.
Are you telling me you don't have a keg of Guinness just right off camera over there?
Do you know, I in earlier life, I did a little bit of stand-up, right? Just open mic nights. And my whole bit was, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, I'm ashamed to tell you, my name is Ian, I'm Irish, and I'm not an alcoholic. and then I do this whole bit about how, I first kind of knew about it when, age 17, my friends were throwing up after the bar, and I was walking home perfectly straight line. I didn't have any DUIs at 21, and people started really asking me about it. And, so the whole bit was
slow intervention.
Yeah, exactly. I was embarrassed at a wedding because, honestly, I didn't pass out at any time, and I made it back to my hotel room. People were asking a lot of questions about that. But at the very end of the bit, then I would go, well, thanks so much for your time, everyone. And by the way, I'm only joking. Of course I'm an alcoholic.
I love
But
that.
no, I'm a lightweight. To answer your question, I'm actually a super lightweight, which is unusual for my countrymen.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the genetic part you didn't get.
Yeah.
All right. So you left the city. You bought a property up in Grass Valley. For people who don't know, it's up north of San Francisco, to pursue your sort of non-tech passion about rescuing dogs. Tell us about that. I don't know anything about dog rescues or what that looks like.
Well, I've been a dog lover all my life and always had a dog in Ireland, but I moved to America in 2010 and I was in a little apartment in San Francisco, which didn't allow animals.
But you got one anyway.
Well, creatively, I thought, well, if I was to foster a dog, I wouldn't technically be owning a dog. So I volunteered for one of the nonprofits down in the Bay Area. And the very first foster we had, of course, became a foster fail. That's Harry. He's on the cover of the book. And we were a foster home for, a decade.
What's a foster fail?
So that's where you intend to foster a dog, but you actually end up adopting them. So you fail at fostering.
That's not the goal of fostering, is not to keep it.
It tends to end up that way for a lot of people. You've heard about the puppy dog sale, right? Hey, could you look after my puppy for 10 minutes? And guess what? You just got rid of the puppy, right? So, and I've done exactly that, by the way. I had my next door neighbor one time who had a dog. This is when I lived back in the city. And I said, oh, listen, I've got this really sweet puppy. I'm going to be out of town. Do you think you could look after him for a day? And they're like, of course. No lie, that dog still lives in that person's house today and never came back to us. But anyway, a bit of a tragedy. I don't want to put a downer on it, but a couple of the things that happened in that foster years where dogs were unadoptable and sadly were, euthanized. And that just cut us up really bad. So my wife and I thought, well, there needs to be a place which is not just a rescue, but a sanctuary for those dogs that are just unadoptable. So we managed to pick up nearly 10 acres up here in Grass Valley, spent a lot of money fencing it and creating different areas and intake areas and what have you. So our home is, we 259 dogs through here so far, I think, but there's 3 of them that have been here for more than 2 years. We had another one that was here for 3 years and finally did get adopted. So it was just a question of, there needed to be something like this during the pandemic. So I was able to work full-time remote, obviously. So that made moving out of the Bay Area a little easier. And country life, there's nothing like it. It's peaceful. It's quiet here. We live on a little loop, so there's no through traffic or anything like that. The one funny thing is that we live near to an Air Force base, and Beale Air Force Base is where the U2 spy planes fly out of. So, funny story, I'm here about a week or something like that, and I'm talking to a colleague back home, and I'm on the phone, I'm standing out my front deck. And he goes, how is it? And I said, oh my goodness. I said, you cannot believe the peace and quiet. I didn't realize how much noise pollution there was in San Francisco until I moved here. And as I'm midway through the sentence, a U2 comes from behind my home. We live on a sort of hill, so you don't hear anything behind it. Deafeningly loud, flies directly over my house to the point that, you couldn't hear anything. And I'm actually, at the time, saying, it's so peaceful here. Kind of one of those comedic timing things that you couldn't really script.
My dad's family is from Yuba City and Marysville and right by Beale Air Force Base. So when I was a kid, we used to go, you could just park right at the end of the runway and be under them as they're taking off and landing. And it is loud as F, it is loud. And the SR-71 used to be based out of Beale as well.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, in the book, I did mention about the first space shuttle takeoff because I was at that in Florida. My dad was a pilot, Air Force originally, and then Aer Lingus, and he took us allegedly to Disney World. What we didn't know is he just wanted to see the space shuttle take off. So, we got dragged out of Disney World. I was 10 years old. And I'm like, what? We're at Disney World. I don't want to go anywhere else, But we went to Cape Canaveral. I think it was called Cape Kennedy at the time or something. And we watched that very first space shuttle take off, and you're sort of 20 miles away from where you can see it. So by the time it's, pretty high in the sky, you're assuming that you would hear the rocket blast, but you don't, because sound only travels at a second and a mile or whatever, So I remember that. I remember being really disappointed. It's like, we can see this thing flying up into the sky. It's so cool. Why can't we hear it? And then, sort of 10 seconds later, you just get blasted by sound. And you kind of, I get it. It's all the way over there. And the really beautiful thing is I was in the towers at Redwood Shores, whatever it was, 35 years later, and I looked out the window, and there was that space shuttle on the back of a 747. It was being taken down to, I think, Los Angeles, where I think it's in a museum or something like that.
Probably, yeah.
But they flew it around the bay just as a sort of a, farewell, take a look kind of thing. And it was a really kind of emotional bookend for me, like my first ever trip to America, I had seen that space shuttle take off, and here I am in my office at Redwood Shores watching it taking its, I guess, final retirement. Yeah,
that's so cool. I still haven't seen a rocket launch up close. I want to see it really bad. But
go down to Texas, right?
Yeah, or California. A lot of them launch from Vandenberg in California.
I saw one of the SpaceX launches from California in Phoenix, and you could see the cool little shapes it makes as it's going through the air. A bunch of people were pulled over and got out of their car to watch because it was just so cool. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, my dad was in the Air Force as well, so I grew up on Air Force bases.
Oh, very cool.
And we got to watch I remember watching the F-14 Tomcats take off once, and that man, I was in. I'm like, I
badass.
Top Gun, baby. That's why you like Val Kilmer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a connection there.
Ian, what are the economics of running a dog sanctuary, I guess you would call it?
Well, just imagine getting a pile of money and pouring petrol on it and just setting it on fire. Pretty much what you're dealing with.
It's here. Is this like boat ownership level of burning money?
Worse. I would say worse. No,
worse than a boat.
We run it. We're 90% self-funded, my wife and I. And we do get donations, and we're very happy of them. The book, every copy of the books puts about $10 into dog food. So, we raise money.
How do you raise money? What do you do to raise money?
Nothing, like I say.
Well, you have like a benefit thing, or do you?
We have a website where you can donate, obviously PayPal, Venmo, and all that kind of stuff. A lot of times people who adopt dogs, we don't charge adoption fees. We just ask people to make a donation based on what they can afford. So once we've done the home check and we realize that, it's going to be a good home for the family. Now, some of them will, sure, we had up to $400 is just there you go. Thank you so much. We're going to give you $400. But typically neutering pets cost over $500. So, and we neuter every dog that we get in here. I had one dog bitten by a rattlesnake last year. That was, I think, $6,500 in vet's fees, And when that dog was adopted, I think we got, a couple of cases of dog food. So it's a labor of love. It's definitely not something that's in any way sustainable. But I, of course, contract and deliver sales training, and that's how I fund it.
Ian, your story with dogs, I think there's a connection to Africa, right? Because you have like a pretty strong tie there, don't you?
Well, my father was third generation Rhodesian, and my grandmother bred Rhodesian Ridgebacks. So my earliest memories of anything really are puppies, Ridgeback puppies, and lots of them, And of course, everybody loves puppies, particular children.
Yeah.
But she had these two Ridgeback female and males that were, I swear to God, the most insanely well-trained dogs you've ever met. The joke was they could pretty much do your taxes for you, So I had an early impression on how dogs could be so bonded with their humans, so intensely in tune with their humans. And my running joke, my wife kind of teases me about this, but in relationship advice, I always tell people, be like a dog. Anytime your partner comes home, jump up and down like you're so freaking excited that it's the best thing in the world. So my wife works in a hospital. She's sometimes gone for 2-3 days at a time. She comes home, I act like the dogs. Yay! Woohoo! You're home! Yay! And it's a kind of running joke, but believe it or not, it really does work. I'm hoping this is true for you, but when I walk into a room, people don't usually cheer, right? Most times they don't even notice. So if you can imagine relying on the fact that every time you go up your driveway, and we've got a long driveway. We live in the middle of nowhere, you know. People and dogs are super excited to see you. Well, that makes you feel a certain.
It really does melt the stress away from whatever was happening before you walked in the door. Like I have 2 Frenchies, and when I come home from business trips, my wife's on the couch. It's fine. But my dogs, like, they celebrate when I come home. It's like a whole thing, and they wiggle their butts so cutely. Like, it's like I forget everything I was thinking about. It's like,
Absolutely.
I love it. And they do tilt their heads in the funniest way, like you were saying earlier. It's like the cutest thing.
Frenchies are adorable, man.
I freaking love them. They got a lot of personality.
And you know that you do know this, right? Frenchie owners, Frenchie parents are the most obsessed dog parents of any breed.
I mean, my wife,
Legit.
she is obsessed. Like, she calls Finnegan her soulmate. I mean,
Finnegan?
Yeah.
Love it.
Finny, yeah, he's a little red apricot Frenchie. He's the most beautiful dog we've ever had. And yeah, she's like, she got a picture of him, like a sonogram, but it's a Frenchie in the sonogram. Like, that's her birthing story. She's obsessed.
No, there are memes about Frenchie owners. You know that, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's dog owners and then there's Frenchie owners.
It's so funny.
What's the meme? I don't know.
Just about the obsession, you know. For a start, most Frenchie owners will never have any other kind of dog, ever.
Yeah.
Like, that'll be the breed, you know. Any other breed, yeah, sure, people like Shepherds or Labradors or whatever, but, you know, they're usually okay with any other kind of breed, too. Frenchie owners are just very single-tracked.
Mm.
And they're a very unique type of dog. So, you know, you kind of get that. It takes a certain type of person to be a Frenchie parent, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a pug and then a Boston pug mix.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got Frenchies, and they're more high maintenance, I think. They're very social. So, like, leaving to go to the store when they were younger was a huge event.
Drama, yeah.
Yes, lots of drama. And they make the funniest sounds when they're little. I remember I was laying on the couch once when I first got my dog Tate, and he falls asleep right in front of me on the couch, and then he falls off because, you know, he completely relaxed, and he made a sound that we have never heard. And it was like a squeak toy and a baby combined into one. I mean, it was the cutest thing. And they will cry like babies. They will make sounds, and
I was about to say that. They actually kind of can look like babies when they're making those funny faces and sounds.
It's so cute.
Ian, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun. You're obviously engaging. You're a great storyteller. I loved reading your book. I'm sure that you're super great when you're delivering training sessions, and you're wonderful at your job. Everybody listening, go buy Ian's book now. It's called Rescuing Dogs and Salespeople, Memoir of a Mutt, available on Amazon. We'll put a link in the show notes. Also, make a donation to his nonprofit dog rescue at spandowhouse.com. We'll put a link to that as well. Ian, thank you very much.
Gents, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too, Ian. Thank you. This was great.